these old guys? These old guys keep being president. Why don't we have a young guy? And so, so it was very similar. And Henry was really like he knew a lot about literature and poetry, and he even, this is the next question, earned the title from the Pope, Defender of the Faith. What did he do?
He gave a lot of money to the church.
He did not. Maybe he did, but that isn't why he got to be Defender of the Faith. Did anybody find that? I will find it.
Well, I tried that.
It's okay. I'm going to read it to you. Henry, scandalized by Martin Luther's teaching, are you with me, Nathan? Wrote a book in which he upheld the doctrine of the church on the 7 sacraments. The Pope was so pleased that he gave to Henry the title Defender of the Faith. Henry is defending the church. The Pope says, good for you, Henry. FYI, he has fallen in love with a pretty girl that's one of his wife's ladies in waiting named Anne Boleyn. He'd really like to marry her. So his chancellor is named Cardinal Wolsey. This is the next question I asked you. I told you who he was. He was the chancellor of Henry. Why did Henry get so mad at him and drove him out of his office? He wanted the cardinal to do something for him, and the cardinal couldn't get it done. Hint, it's what we were just talking about in the story. What is Henry?
Couldn't get the divorce. Okay, never mind. I was right.
He couldn't get the divorce. Okay, so here's drum roll. Yes. Catherine, her nephew is Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. That guy we talked about a couple of weeks ago that was massively important, that was the king of the Netherlands and Spain and the Holy Roman Emperor. And this is his aunt. Her nephew is the most powerful man in Europe. And her nephew says, don't diss my aunt. You do not do that to my aunt. Don't mess with my aunt. You are so not getting that divorce. It doesn't even matter if the Pope would have given it to him. Charles isn't going to allow this. Catherine goes and she begs on her knees, oh, why are you throwing me and my little girl out in the cold? It's pathetic. But Henry has an answer for this. And Henry's answer is really strange. If the church won't give me a divorce, I'm going to start my own church. England's going to have its own church now. We're not Catholic anymore, and I'm in charge of the church. And you know what? My first act is, boom, I just gave myself a divorce. Problem solved. This was the start. This is how the Reformation came around in England. It had nothing to do with theology. It had to do with Henry wanting a divorce. And he just said, to heck with it. I'm starting my own church. Yes, Oren.
There was probably a much easier way to do that. Instead of divorcing, you could just...
Well, here's the problem. If he just takes a girlfriend on the side, because maybe Oren's thinking, why doesn't he just take Anne Boleyn as his girlfriend, and everybody just pretends they don't know that he has a girlfriend and a wife. But if his girlfriend has a son, the son won't be legitimate. He's got to marry someone to have a son who can be king next.
No, I mean, like, why doesn't he just kill off whatever her name is?
Well, he's gonna shift his tactics, and he's gonna do that. So if you ever, Henry VIII is famous for having 6 wives. It was 6. He's Henry VIII, but he had 6 wives. You can remember it this way. Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Okay? So these are the fates of his 6 wives. So he divorced Catherine, and he marries Anne. Anne has a daughter named Elizabeth. Crud. The Queen Elizabeth. Yes, not the one that just died a couple of years ago, because she'd be like 400 years old then. She did, Jaden, though, she did rule a super long time, the first Elizabeth, too. Queen Elizabeth I. There's only 2. There's only been 2. And they both ruled a super long time, interestingly. But anyway, but Anne was not having a son. So Henry decided to accuse her of cheating on him and had her head cut off. So then he married, I think Lady Jane Seymour. I can't remember. Okay, I lose their names after this. Third one he marries, and she finally, yay, has a son, Edward. Hooray! And then she dies. Bummer. And then he does it 3 more times. He marries 3 more times. No more kids. No more kids. So he dies, and his son Edward gets to be king. Awesome. Except then Edward just turned around and died. Like, after all that work and those deaths and divorces, seriously, he's just going to be king for a couple of years and he's going to die and he's not even going to have kids. So there's what? You anticipate. Is exactly the next thing. So we're left with only 2 heirs and they're both girls. And Mary's the older one. Mary gets to be queen. Think about Mary. Mary saw her mom get divorced and driven off in disgrace. Catherine took Mary to France or Spain, wherever, and raised her there a very, very strong Catholic. And Mary came back to England, now Protestant England, and said, I don't think so. We're cleaning things up and we're going back to the Catholic Church, and that's the way it is. And so she's known to history as Bloody Mary because she executed many Protestants. Yeah, except it wasn't really, like, it was more political than anything. And I got to set the record straight. Elizabeth, when she turned around and executed a bunch of Catholics. So there's enough blame to go around on both sides, okay? It's not like the Catholics were burning Protestants left and right. Protestants were also burning Catholics left and right. So I just want to set that record straight. Mary married the King of Spain, Philip II, the guy we read about last week that was like, could never make up his mind and wouldn't delegate authority or anything. That was Mary's husband, except he didn't live there. He went back to Spain to live. They didn't live together. Apparently it worked for them. It didn't work for them very well because everybody hated Mary because they hated Spain. Remember we talked about, well, you saw in the video last week, England and Spain didn't get along. England and Spain didn't like each other. Why? Because the English are stealing stuff off Spanish boats as they come across the Atlantic Ocean full of stuff from the New World. And they said, this is intolerable. Our queen is married to Philip of Spain? No way. So eventually Mary died. And we're down to 1. Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth. We're going to be revisiting Elizabeth's reign later, like at the end of April. Because it's when Elizabeth was queen that people like Shakespeare were writing plays and the Elizabethan world, because she ruled for 40 some years. Many of the great artists and poets and thinkers of England lived under Elizabeth. So we will come back to her. Now, here's the next question I asked you. It was about enclosures. A, what do I mean by enclosures? B, why is it a problem? What's an enclosure, Nathan?
Oh, an enclosure is like a sheep pen.
A sheep pen. So aren't sheep nice? Do we hate sheep? Why don't we want to do that?
They took up too much space and it killed the farmers, right?
Okay, so do you want sheep in your garden? Okay, so let's start there. What will sheep do in your garden?
Eat.
They will eat the food you are growing. We can't do that. So we can either have a field full of sheep or we can have a field growing food, but we can't do both at the same time. All right?
Sheep are food.
Sheep are food. Although in this case, they were using them more for wool. This is why everybody wanted to start doing this. You might say, well, why is this a problem? Just enclose a few sheep pens. No, people were running around enclosing farms to graze sheep because you could make a boatload of money doing this. You ship the wool to the Netherlands and they have factories there and they can transform it into thread and cloth and what have you. And people were getting wealthy off of this. So yes, and so it's just like buying stock in a company that's going up or something like that. Like boom, I'm getting in. I'm getting in on the ground floor of the whole sheep thing. And so another question: how many people does it take to care for a flock of sheep?
Like 3.
It's
I mean,
really
just one shepherd.
yeah. I mean, one person watching like maybe 100 sheep. You give them some food. You don't even have to give them food. You just take them where the grass is and say, "There's your food. Here's some water." And then I don't know, keep wolves from eating them. And then you lead them back, in the wintertime to the barn or whatever. How many people does it take to farm a good-sized farm? What did you say, Jaden? 3? I don't know.
I'm gonna say
Like it takes.
10.
I feel like okay, I am not a very good gardener, but I feel like even a fair-sized garden in your backyard takes a lot of weeding. Do you know what I mean?
I mean,
Remember, they don't have
in my
machines.
backyard, it's not that long.
All right. Well, maybe you love gardening more than I do, Jaden. I hate
Yeah,
hate weeding.
How much food did we get from that?
Okay, well that's true.
A giant potato bush.
if if you're gonna, but Jaden, if you're gonna grow enough food to feed your entire family and maybe sell at the market, you're gonna have to have some people. So the people who used to work the farm are now out of work. Does that make sense? Because it took more effort to farm than it did to take care of the sheep. Nathan.
We actually have a garden in our backyard that we're using our food compost.
Oh, very good. And what if your garden, like multiply your garden by 100, by 50? Then it might be a little tiresome to do this all by hand.
Yeah.
Even for Jaden, who's a really good gardener. So where do you go? You are a farmer. You are a farmer, but they have taken the land that you farm and they've enclosed it and put a bunch of sheep there. Where are you going to go to make a living? Where might you go?
A farmer's market.
And you think maybe the farmers there might hire you to go work in their farm?
Yep.
Okay, this is not a bad idea. Where do you think the market might be? What?
The butcher.
Well, what sort of like is Jaden? Is the farmers market out in the middle of a field somewhere, or where do you think it's going to be? In a city. You're going to go to the city to see if you can get work. Do you know this happened in America? Do you know 150 years ago, most people in America lived in rural areas and on farms. Most people today in America live in cities because farming isn't as you can't make as good a living farming. Also, there are bigger and bigger farms. As we have machinery, people buy up land and there's bigger. So one company or one family might farm hundreds and hundreds of acres. The people who can't farm anymore, they went to the cities. And if everybody, think about this, if everybody goes to the city at the same time looking for a job, are they all going to find a job? No, everybody wants the job, but there's not enough jobs. And so what's going to happen if you don't get the job?
You die.
Both of those. Or you go broke, you can't buy food, you end up begging, and Jaden, maybe you die. This is true. And so can you understand why people were worked up about this? So I'm not going to read it to you. There was a long excerpt from Thomas More, the same guy who wrote about Richard III. He wrote a book called Utopia about this island in the Pacific that everything was perfect. And talked about their government and everything. But it started out with this tirade against enclosures and how terrible it was for the farmers that they're being driven to the cities and they are begging and starving in the cities because they have no work. It was a real crisis in England. And this was under Edward, but Edward was young and he didn't do anything about it. It just got worse and worse. Okay, last thing, maybe on our Henry VIII Day and Elizabeth Day. What did England lose in 1558 and why is this significant? I said, hint, think about all we've learned about England's relationship with France. Nathan. They lost the very last town they had in France in 1558. Remember, a few weeks ago, we were talking about France, and I told you that at one point England owned more of France than France owned of France, which is just very strange. And then they fought for 100 years over it. And then Henry V took over, and he died really young, and his kid took over, and his kid lost a bunch of it, botched it. And so they had one Calais. It's a port city. It's right across the English Channel. And they lost it. At this point, England owns 0 France. However, England at this point is starting to carve out bits of North America, right? The colony of Virginia and bits of Canada. And France was largely French, but Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, I think still are some sort of, I mean, they're parts of Canada. They've got some relationship with England. Like occasionally the Prince of Wales comes and visits. I don't know. I'm not up on current, but the status. I was born in Newfoundland. However, I know nothing about it. I was born in Newfoundland, the little island off the coast of Canada,
It's not
off the
little.
east coast. Well, it's not little. It's not as big as Australia, but it's bigger than Hawaii and smaller than Australia.
That gives lots of description.
Yes, a lot of leeway in there. So there were English holdings in Canada. There were English holdings. So they lost France, but they gained a little bit in the New World. Plus, they keep sending those privateers out to plunder Spanish ships and be like legal pirates, which is just very fun.
Wait,
Um,
you could be a pirate?
You could be a pirate, Jaden. The queen would give you a piece of paper and it says, you, Jaden, can just steal whatever you want off a Spanish ship, just like a pirate.
That's a good
And if you get caught, you can show them the paper and say, the queen says it's okay.
Didn't she have a suitor guy who that's all he did?
Yeah, Francis Drake.
Yeah.
Yeah, he explored, but he also pirated. Okay, that is England. Next week, I want you to read chapter 7. And like I said, we're going to look at the north. England's in the north, but we haven't really talked about what's going on artistically in the Netherlands and to the north. All these artists have been Italian. So we're going to talk about the Renaissance in the north. We're going to meet, I erased his name, our friend Erasmus, and talk about all that he did. He also had a tangle with Martin Luther that we will talk about. That is a name that I'm sure you guys know, and we'll be talking more about him later this semester. the earlier Martin, not the king one, but the non-king one. Are there any comments or questions before we talk about Fellowship of the Ring? No, we're good.
I didn't read all of it.
That's very honest of you,
I finished it.
and that's awesome.
I finished it 2 weeks
Well,
ago.
we are finishing Okay, everybody listen. We are finishing Fellowship this week. If you've already finished it, we're reading the Two Towers next. So just get the Two Towers and keep reading.
We're already working on it.
Yes. This is what I like to hear. This is what I like to hear. Yes.
For everyone, me and my mom have been doing a thing where we'll listen to it on an audiobook and then we'll pull out a puzzle and we'll work on it. And that really helps me and my mom do it. So if you guys hate reading, if you really like to do that. I hate reading.
Some people like listening. Also, there's you can get various dramatizations even, which I don't recommend. I'd like you to be listening to the actual book. But if you're really into it, there's really good BBC dramatizations of it, and it's amazing.
Music,
Yeah.
I got that one for the first one. It was so good. It's
Excellent.
Or
Zach.
if you want to be really smart, you can listen to it and do it your science. Then you get 2 things.
No, I don't recommend
That's
this.
impossible.
Do not multitask when you study.
Yeah,
I mean, you can multitask while you're listening. Keeping your hands busy is nice while you're listening, but not if you're studying science. Okay, I will start off with the thing that Jaden saw, but was sworn to secrecy. Not really. We met a lot of people at this Council of Elrond this week. Among them was Gimli, Gloin's son. Remember Gloin from The Hobbit? Oin and Gloin? And Gimli, his son, was there. And it says, Gimli the dwarf alone wore openly a short shirt of steel rings, for dwarves make light of burdens, and in his belt was a broad-bladed axe. This is my last thing that I get to bring this year. This is Gimli's axe. I am going to leave it by the door. I will let you go early enough that you can pick it up. Warning. This is not slicey, okay? This is sharp. This is sharp. Do not swing it around at all. First of all, it's heavy. It's heavier than you think it's going to be. You're probably going to want to hold it up here where I'm holding it. This part's heavy. It's not easy to hold. I mean, you guys are strong, I'm sure, but it's harder down here. So pick it up maybe like here, and just hold it, but don't swing it around at all, because I do not want to have to explain to your parents or the church why somebody was maimed in my class.
What does maimed mean?
It means have bits of you lopped off, and so you're permanently damaged. Permanently damaged. Irreparably, that it won't heal.
I'd rather permanently damage myself.
No, I refuse to let you permanently damage yourself. So anyway, I'm putting it here. Do not chop. Anyway, that's Gimli's axe. And I will, when my daughter gets home from New Zealand, I will tell her that everybody had a wonderful, wonderful time with her stuff. Okay, here's what I would like to ask you. I promised that we would have a discussion, and here's my question that I'm throwing out. Is there anyone in the Fellowship of the Ring that isn't what they seem to be? Strider, let's talk about him. How is he? What does he seem to be?
A spy.
He's
Kind of a dark guy. No, so he seems
okay.
like,
We need one at a time. Let Jaden go. No,
he
don't
seems like,
sigh.
like in the start, he acts like he's like a spy, or like he's super stealthy, and then towards the end he's super or he starts to become friendly and like wants to like or
Does get stabbed.
yeah,
But
like twice.
Yes, and it wasn't good. Not to death, but almost worse than death, right? Because with a really, really evil.
Turned into a black rider.
Yes, with a really evil blade. So he seems shifty at the beginning. Asher. That's very good. He seems like a closed book. He doesn't, when he meets him at the Prancing Pony, right? He's just kind of lurking. He's loitering, we would call it. He doesn't seem to have a reason to be there. And he seems to be looking at Frodo really, in a suspicious way. Nathan.
The book said that he feels fair and looks power.
Yeah. Frodo says, I think that someone who serves the enemy would look fairer and feel fouler. But Strider doesn't look fair. He doesn't look good, but he doesn't feel evil.
Yeah.
And so they kind of trust to their instinct. Also, it does help when they get the letter from Gandalf and it says, Strider is my friend. Although this could be a forged letter. But it just so happens that Strider knows the poem that's in the letter, so it makes him seem very legit. Yeah, Zach.
So this is not exactly related to, well, I won't say his name. But does anyone else get annoyed when they have those songs at like the bar that they sing or things like that, or like they're Tom Bombadil, and like they don't give you the tune,
Oh.
and so like you don't really know how to picture it.
Oh, okay.
I listened to it. It's horrible.
You could make up your own tune.
It's like,
I just, you know what, Zach, I just enjoy them as poems. In fact, I marked one to read because I really, really like this one if we have time. So maybe you can just think of them as like reciting poetry.
I like to skip.
Or you can think of if you can fit the words into a tune, sometimes that's fun. Do you guys?
It would be kind of nice to know what he was thinking of when he wrote it.
That would be cool. There is a record album. I don't know if it's been digitized. And my family has 2 of them. This is so weird. My daughter has one and my son found another one at resale. It's recordings of Tolkien reading and singing some of the songs. Oh, I know. You could Google this. I don't know if it's available on CD if you don't have a record player in your house. But yeah. Warren. Oh.
Which sucks because the audiobook reader can't sing, and he clearly does not know what he's doing.
I don't know.
Little House on
Well,
the Prairie. Right?
Let's Nathan, is this a comment about the singing?
It is pretty bad. Which one do you
Somewhat.
like?
Okay, let's have one more comment about the singing and then we're going to move on from there. But Nathan, go for
My
it.
favorite poem was, or kind of like song, was like the troll one.
Oh, yes.
Graveyard.
Graveyard. Sam made it up.
Yeah.
There's like, Sam, you've got skills. We didn't know. We didn't know. So Strider turns out to be, when they get to Rivendell, Strider is changed his clothes, and it comes out who is Strider. Strider is a king. He is the heir of the kings of men from the West. He is of a race that, if you read the background sort of mythological book called the Silmarillion, you find out they are the original men, and they came from this place called Numenor in the West. And here's how Strider describes himself and what he does. So remember what everybody thinks about him. Listen to what Strider says. Because Boromir, by the way, Boromir comes. Boromir is what he seems to be, right? Boromir is not hiding anything. He's a guy. He's from Gondor. They are next door neighbors of Mordor. It is not a good neighborhood anymore. And they are busy defending themselves. And he says, look, here I am. We had a dream. I've come for help. What's the deal? And when Aragorn stands up and says, you know, I'm the heir of the kings of Gondor. Like, I don't know. You don't look like much to me. Boromir is skeptical that Strider will be able to help them. Yeah, Jaden.
I can't believe anyone's brought up how Gandalf died.
Oh, you just brought it up.
What?
You just brought it up.
I know, but
They don't know. The rest of them don't know. Now they know.
Gandalf actually
Have you
died.
read the second one or ever
So
seen?
let's just remind, it's okay, Jaden, but let's just remind each other, try not to talk about things that haven't happened in the book yet,
Oh,
so that it doesn't ruin it for people. But it's okay. I think, Jaden, I think a lot of people knew. So it's okay. And I'm just gonna
wait, is that in the third book?
no, it's going to be in the Two Towers. I think it's going to be in the next book.
What? No, Gandalf dies.
Is it in
Gandalf is very dead.
Oh, that's right. At the end of, you're right. I'm sorry. Okay, can we go back to my thing? Here's what Aragorn says in the council. If Gondor, Boromir, has been a stalwart tower, we have played another part. Many evil things that there are, that your strong walls and bright swords do not stay. You know little of the lands beyond your bounds. Peace and freedom, do you say? The North would have known them little, but for us. Fear would have destroyed them. But when dark things come from the houseless hills or creep from sunless woods, they fly from us. What roads would any dare to tread? What safety would there be in quiet lands or in the homes of simple men at night if the Dunedain were asleep or were all gone into the grave? And yet, less thanks have we than you. Travelers scowl at us, and countrymen give us scornful names. Strider, I am, to one fat man who lives within a day's march of foes that would freeze his heart or lay his little town in ruin if he were not guarded ceaselessly. Yet we would not have it otherwise. If simple folk are free from care and fear, simple they will be, and we must be secret to keep them so. It turns out Aragorn and his kind have been guarding the Shire and Bree. They keep the evil out of those places, but people look at them and say, well, remember how Barlaman Butterbur was? He's like, I don't know. I tried to get the Strider wants to talk to you. I tried to keep him out. I don't know. He's a shifty one. He's protecting you, and you treat him like he's a nobody. Can you think of someone in history who was treated like a nobody? That would be Jesus. I mean, there's lots of people, but this is the one I'm thinking of.
You're saying Strider's Jesus?
I am not, but Jaden, I am saying he's a type of Jesus. He's a character. That's exactly what type means. He has characteristics. The one that isn't what he seems to be on the outside, and the one that nobody or very few realize what he really is. Very few. And even them, not completely. Not even right after the resurrection, they didn't really realize. So Strider is someone who is not what he seems. Is there anyone else in this book who is not, or turns out not to be what he seems?
Gollum?
In what way?
Well, Gollum was like super bad. He looked super bad at least.
Well, now, as far as we've read so far,
Oh,
he is super bad. And you know what? He is super bad.
I mean, I heard though he helped him.
Although we find out Gollum was not always what he is now. In the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf says, once upon a time, there were a group of creatures not unlike the hobbits of the Shire. And Gollum was one of them. He unfortunately has become something he wasn't once. I think he is what he seems, but he wasn't always that. How about
Too bad J.R. Tolkien didn't write a book called Gandalf and like how he knows all this stuff. Or, like, his
Yeah.
history.
Well, yeah, we hear a little bit in the Silmarillion about who the wizards are and how far back they go. A little bit, but not very much. Zero about Tom Bombadil, unfortunately. What about hobbits, especially Bilbo and Frodo? What does the world of the Middle Earth think about hobbits?
They're fat, small, and dumb.
They're small and dumb, and they eat all the time, and they really don't have much to do with anything important. And Elrond, let me see if I can find this. I've got little flags everywhere again. And just a second. I'm process of elimination. I got to be getting closer.
You should mark your tags.
I know. Okay, it's got to be this one. If it's not this one, I'm gonna. Okay, so what I'm looking for. Oh, here we go. Another person I will just throw out there who ends up not being what he seems is Saruman. And I'm going to talk more about him in a minute. Saruman, the head of the Order of Wizards. But Gandalf tells everybody that Saruman has gone bad. And this is what Elrond says. This is grievous news concerning Saruman, he said. For we trusted him, and he is deep in all our counsels. It is perilous to study too deeply the arts of the enemy, for good or for ill. But such falls and betrayals, alas, have happened before. Of the tales that we have heard this day, the tale of Frodo was most strange to me. I have known few hobbits, save Bilbo here, and it seems to me that he is perhaps not so alone and singular as I had thought him. The world has changed much since I last was on the westward roads. Elrond has only ever met Bilbo of the hobbits. And Bilbo's not normal. Do you know, after his journey, he's got a little bit of fire in him, and he left his home as an old man and traveled to Rivendell, traveled to the Lonely Mountain, and then back to Rivendell. And Elrond thought he's peculiar. And now he's met Frodo. He says, you know what? Maybe those hobbits have more in them than I realized. I didn't know they had that grit underneath. How about Pippin and Merry? Are they willing to come on this trip? Yeah. And they tell them, it's going to be awful. Oh, we know. Maybe they don't know how awful. But no, we're in. We're in. If our friend is going, we're going. They really seem much more resilient than anybody outside the Shire thinks. They don't just blow smoke rings and, eat many times a day, although they do this. Saruman has changed as well. What does Saruman want to do in this section? And how is he going to win? What does winning mean, and how is he going to do it? And which side does he think that is? Sauron. Sauron's obviously going to win. If I join now, Gandalf, if you join now, we're in on the ground floor of the new kingdom. We've got it all. I am Saruman the White. What does white usually make us think of? Purity. I was thinking of purity. So back in the very early church, after the baptisms, they gave you a white robe, and you wore it for the first, I don't know, week, 10 days, something like that. Well, they didn't do a lot of laundry in the ancient world, you know. You didn't wash your clothes every time you wore them. So they wore these white robes to say that your sins have been washed away in baptism. So often we think of white as being pure, but listen to what Saruman says. I am Saruman the wise, Saruman ringmaker, Saruman of many colors. I looked then and saw that his robes, which had seemed white, were not so, but were woven of all colors. And if he moved, they shimmered and changed hue so that the eye was bewildered. I liked white better, I said. White, he sneered. It serves as a beginning. White cloth may be dyed. The white page can be overwritten, and white light can be broken. You know, he means, have you ever played with a prism and the light shines through and you can make rainbows on the wall? Do you know what I mean? The light goes through at different angles and you can make rainbows. That's what he means, the light can be broken. In which case it is no longer white, said I, and he that breaks a thing to find out what it is, has left the path of wisdom. Saruman has broken what he had. I want to be, picture, even if you haven't done it, it's helpful if you've done it. Picture you have a little glass, a prism, and the light shining through, and you're like doing the thing. You know how sometimes we reflect the light off our watches and things like we like to play with it on the wall or the ceiling and then shine it in people's eyes. It's really annoying to the other people in the room. You can make it be whatever you want it to be, right? You can make whatever colors come out of it that you want. Saruman's going to make the world whatever he wants it to be. Do you think Sauron's going to let him do that? For what you've heard of him so far in this book, does Sauron seem like the kind of entity that's going to let somebody just trick him and take over? I don't think it's going to work, Saruman. I think it's going to work. He's no longer what he seemed to be. He was the good guy. Maybe you guys know this. In old Westerns, they would have the good guy, the good cowboy would wear a white hat, and then the bad, mean guy would come into town. He had a black hat, and you knew that he was the bad guy. Saruman was the good guy, but he's not the good guy anymore.
He was.
He was,
Why
and he
did
gave it
turn
up.
bad?
Because he just saw that Sauron was winning.
But it was like something about how he figured out like dark magic, and then like.
You know what, Jaden, I think this is what I just read. Yeah, you've got it right on. Elrond just said in the tab that I can't find anymore because I don't, whoa. He said, it is perilous to study too deeply the arts of the enemy for good or for ill. Saruman wanted to learn everything Sauron knew. But the deeper you get into it, the more you get sucked in, right? This is why we as Christians don't mess with the occult. We just don't go there because we know there are powers that are evil. And if we study them, you might say, I'm just going to study all of this so that I can witness to people better who are dealing with it. It's very dangerous. You start dabbling and it sucks you in. Saruman dabbled, I guess would be the equivalent of us dabbling in the occult. He dabbled in dark powers. Well, it's like Anakin Skywalker, right? He dabbled in it. He wanted power, right? He's got to save Padme, whatever. And he dabbles in power, and before he knows it, he's sucked in. He had a bent that way already, I sense in him much fear. But he dabbled in it, and it sucked him in. Saruman dabbled in it, and it sucked him in. One of you, did you going to say something? Oh, yes. When you dabble in it. And so I think that is the answer to Jaden's question, that Saruman got too into it, and he found out about power. I mean, he was already a wizard, for crying out loud. Didn't he have enough power? No. Some people never have enough. Frodo himself seems not what he is not what he seems. At that council, he stands up and says, I will do it, though I do not know the way. All these people are fighting over this ring. Why can't they use it, by the way? Why don't they just, Boromir wants to use it.
Because they'll get sucked in.
Okay, for the exact same reason that we were talking about with Jaden's question. You get sucked in. That ring cannot be used. You know what? There are some things in the world that are just wicked.
It's something in there's an ingredient in Mountain Dew where you won't. Okay, stop.
No, I want to hear.
In that Mountain Dew, and it makes you want to have more of it.
I
and you
believe
love
this.
it. And it's kind of same with drugs and alcohol.
It is.
It's like you need it. Like after you use it a couple of times, like you drink it, you're like, I like it. Then
Yes.
you're like bloodthirsty for it.
Yes.
You
And
need it.
Jaden, I think the dark can be like that. I don't mean like the dark at night, but you know what I mean? Like dark evil things
Yes.
can be like that. Good. Okay, I've kept you like 2 minutes over. Yes.
What was the ingredient?
I don't know. Sugar will do that to you.
No, they
A little
took
bit,
it
but
out of it
Correct. Yes.
because they were selling out to them. Also,